These are the frequently asked questions for the completing the square worksheet, and I just wanted to give everybody a chance to hit pause here and check their answers and see how things were going. So go ahead and do that if you need to. But the ones that were asked for were 6, 8, and 10. So we're looking at number 6 here, and we realize that we probably want to move this 3b over by subtracting. So b squared plus 19b plus 84 equals 0. And we're not given the option here of factoring, so we have to complete the square. We need to move the 84 over, so we would subtract that from both sides. And then we have to use our little b over 2 squared formula to figure out what goes in that green slot. And what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So we're going to have to do a really ugly little 19 halves squared, which just happens to be 361 fourths. Looks a little scary, but it does clean up pretty nice. Now we know b squared will give us b squared, and we know what we squared to get 361 fourths. That was 19 halves. Now on the left hand side, if we want to do this by hand, we're going to need to change that negative 84 there. So we would have to take that 84 times 4 to make it into fourths. That's going to be 336. So negative 336 fourths. And we'll have to add that to 361 fourths, and that comes out to a really nice little 25 fourths. So at this step, we would take the square root of both sides and say this is b plus 19 halves plus or minus 5 halves equals plus or minus 5 halves. And that's because the square root of 25 is 5 and the square root of 4 is a 2. And then we would subtract the 19 halves from both sides and have b equals negative 19 halves plus or minus 5 halves. Well, there's two answers there. They're both rational. We have negative 19 halves plus 5 halves, and we have negative 19 halves minus 5 halves. And because we have this common denominator, this won't be too bad. So negative 19 plus halves plus 5 halves will be negative 14 halves, which is negative 7. And negative 19 halves minus 5 halves will be a negative 24 halves, which is negative 12. So those are the two solutions. And what that tells us is this was factorable, but they didn't want us to do that, since those worked out so nice. We know that was factorable. So that was the first one that anybody had asked for. And the second one is number 8. So I think I'll get a new page. Number 8 says negative 4r squared minus r minus 82 equals negative 10r minus 5r squared. So let's get everything on the same side. Let's add 10r and add 5r squared. Both sides. On the right hand side we get a 0. 4r squared minus negative 4r squared plus 5r squared is 1r squared. We have a negative r plus 10r, that's going to be plus 9r, minus 82 equals 0. Again, we're not allowed the option of factoring. This one actually wouldn't end up being factorable anyway. So let's move the 82 out of the way by adding it to both sides. And then let's complete the square. So our b value here for our b over 2 squared is going to be the 9. And if we square both of those, we'll get 81 fourths. So we have to add 81 fourths to both sides. So just like in number 6, we end up with fourths here. And this will give us r plus, and then we think, well, what did we square? We squared 9 halves. So there is our binomial squared. And on the other side, if you wanted to do some math by hand, you could do 82 times 4 is 328 fourths, and we need to add 81 fourths, and that gives us 409 fourths. Now, we'll keep going. So at this point, we would take the square root and say r plus 9 halves equals plus or minus the square root of 409. If you plug that into your calculator and try to take that, that is obnoxious. but we have the 4 on the bottom, which we definitely can simplify to a 2 because we're taking square roots. So we'll leave that and we'll subtract 9/2 from both sides and get r equals negative 9/2 plus or minus the square root of 409 over 2. And those would be our two solutions, negative 9/2 plus the square root of 409 over 2 and negative 9/2 minus the square root of 409 over 2. And then the last one was a number 10. And this one is 2x squared plus 17x equals negative 3x squared plus 9. This time I'm only going to move the x squared term over. Like I said, we know we're supposed to complete the square. That's what this worksheet was about. So 5x squared plus 17x equals 9. But this time we have a problem, and that's because this is not a 1. To complete the square, you have to have a 1 in front of your x squared term. So we're going to have to divide everything by 5, and it is not going to look real pretty, but we will deal with it. So there it is. And now we take b, which is 17/5, and we have to divide that by 2. Remember, dividing fractions by 2 is not a bad thing because all you have to do is multiply your denominator, which in this case is a 5, by 2. So that'll be 17/10 squared. And 17/10 squared is going to give us 289 1/100ths. There we go. Thought I had that written down wrong for a second there. 289 1/100ths. So that's what we need to add to both sides of this. All right, so on the left-hand side we have x plus, and then this is what we squared right here, 17/10. And on the other side, if you want to do it by hand, you could multiply the top and the bottom of 9/5 by 20, so 180 1/100ths, plus 289 1/100ths, which is 469 1/100ths. And then we would take the square root of both sides and get x plus 17/10 equals plus or minus. Square root of 469 is not something nice, but the square root of 100 is 10. And then we can go ahead and subtract 17/10 from both sides. And there are our two answers, negative 17/10 plus the square root of 469 over 10 and negative 17/10 minus the square root of 469 over 10. And those were the three that I was asked to do in class.